smells back. Yeah.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Yah'm saying podcast where we talk about Black culture positively, have positive conversations about Black culture, things that's happening in the world. And, we have a conversation, kind of like we on the block, we on the stoop, you know what I'm saying? Barbershop, in the beauty shop, we had those conversations, man. I'm excited because we got Dr. Kabir, I call him Dr. Ham. Yeah, called Dr. Ham, man. I'm excited to have Dr. Ham here, man, on the, joining us. So pretty appreciate you for coming through, Yeah, appreciate you, man, for coming through to give perspective, man. We're going to talk about the post-racial myth in America, because that's been used a lot here. Since about 2013 or so, when the Supreme Court gutted the pre-clearance clause of the Voting Rights Act. The reasoning was because we got a Black president, we're post-racial society. There's been a lot of groups who's using this post-racial narrative, like Moms for Liberty, people call them Planned Parenthood, but they're using these to remove books, to rewrite history and things of that nature. And most recently in the Supreme Court case for affirmative action, removing from the schools, it was used in there by Justice Clarence Thomas and Roberts, I believe. Said we were a post-racial society, you know what I'm saying?
Colorblind.
Yeah, colorblindness. Constitution, that the Constitution is colorblind, even though that's a lie, because it wouldn't have had the 3/5 clause, But yeah, man. So we're gonna get into it and chat about it, man. Dr. Ham, introduce yourself, bro.
Man, like I said, I am from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a student first. My thought process is you always got to go to the foundation first. So often, I think we deal with the outcome, but not with the inception.
Mm-hmm.
And a scholar, man, like I said, I have a PhD in public policy. But what I realized with public policy is you cannot discuss public policy in America without bringing up the issues of racism. It's impossible because all public policy has been dictated off of a race basis. And I think that's where a lot of times people are afraid to have those discussions and conversations because there's sensitivities when you talk about race. And my goal is to have conversations where we can use our sensitivity, but at the same time speak truth to power.
Yeah.
Because if we don't speak truth to power, what are we doing?
Yeah, we're losing at the end of the day. Yeah, we're losing at the end of the day, and we're not going to affect change. You know what I'm saying? Create change, man. Because one thing about human existence on this planet is cyclical. We're just in another cycle. It's just different. It's just technologies is different. The peoples are different, but the themes are the same. You know what I'm saying? It's the same themes of, that we're going through. One of those things that we talked about before, you were talking about benign neglect.
Yeah.
Can you expound on that?
So in the 60s, man, they found out that there was a lot of social unrest going on, Ross, Detroit. And they did the Kerner Commission report, and they said that we have to figure out a way to solve these problems. And they said the reason that we're having these issues is because we are promising Black people things, equality and voting, and we're not delivering on those. We're not delivering on what we're promising. So they said, let's just not promise them anything, and then they won't be upset about anything. And so you see that same pattern happening today, and it's called benign neglect because it seems harmless to not offer you anything and to say, hey, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
We've done enough for you as a people. Now it's time for you to take it the other way. And I think that the benign neglect has become so powerful that we have accepted the neglect as status quo.
Yeah.
Because we've accepted it. And I think that's part of the challenge when it comes to public policy, is that the benign neglect doesn't work anymore, because this younger generation especially wants to know why they don't have what others have.
Well, right. Exactly.
You know, and that's that intergenerational issue. Because I think that you start to see a generational divide here, where, you know, there's a lot of thought process that goes on to say that at some point history has to intersect with current day.
Right.
There's an intersection. And we're taught history as isolation. Like, well, nothing that happened in the past has any effect on what happens today. Right. And we're the only people who are told that lie.
Right.
And we have to expose that history meets the current day, and is connecting that through our literature, through our stories, through our songs, through our shared experiences, that I think is we're really starting to see that.
Right. And that's where you're starting to see, you know, a lot of these groups, you know, like Moms for Liberty, and states that are passing, or that's getting rid of books, right? They're getting rid of books. They're rewriting history. You know what I'm saying? Retelling history. They're attacking 1619 Project. You know, they don't want to put America in its proper context. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, but that's why, you know, and I think Lincoln, you know, when he talked about a house divided, you know, can't stand.
Right.
And I think for the first time in U.S. history, we are telling our story unapologetically. We are telling a story about our struggle, about our trauma. We're telling a story that has never been heard, and to an audience that doesn't care in most times. I think this is the challenge, is that we're not telling our story for sympathy. We're not telling it for handouts. We're telling it because it needs to be told. And what happens as a result of that, come what may.
Right.
Because it will create some fear. It will create some accountability. And I think that when you start to talk about where we are at today, I believe that we're at a point where the same thing with the Daughters of the Confederacy, that you can only suppress the truth for so long, but eventually it will rise to the top.
Yeah, man. And you know, one interesting thing about, you know, this post-racial myth, you know what I'm saying? People, I think that a lot of times people don't understand time. We are very ignorant on time, you know what I'm saying? And I try to always say this, is that you know, Rosa Parks died in 2009. You know what I mean? Ruby Bridges, who some of these she's still alive. Exactly. The 5-year-old that police had to lead into to school, she's still alive. The survivors, there's some survivors from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Judges got rid of their claim of reparations recently. They're still alive, man. And I think, like you're saying, we think that because we weren't there, that somehow it didn't happen. Like, you know, like it didn't happen, or it didn't, you know,
lifetimes ago.
Yeah, it's like lifetimes ago. And people, you know, like people don't understand, like when slavery ended in 1865, you know, by the time you get to 2020, that's like two people living back to back 80 years, you know.
Yeah.
They living back to back, and they probably knew.
And that's when formal slavery ended, because slavery never ended in America.
No.
It never ended, and I think it was just called by another name. And so when I see it, is that it's the standards have not been changed, but the implications of them are just as damaging. For example, you know, if you look at Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, they both had white dads, but not one was considered biracial. They weren't considered biracial, because if your mama was black, you black. But in 2000, they changed the census so that if you had a mixed parentage, you could now say, I am mixed race. And that's part of that colorblind narrative that we're pushing. Is that the idea is that we want to erase your heritage by changing a standard that was never existed. Like, it's arbitrary. Because if your mama was black, then you black. And we've changed that to now that I am mixed. And that adds to that colorblind narrative that, well, you know, it's like, how will I be perceived in society because I don't look black enough? And it's like, you had mulatto,
Yeah.
quadroon,
Quadroon,
octoroon. You
octoroon.
had all these people, no matter how high yellow you was still a slave.
Yeah.
And so we've changed that. And I think that's part of that color blindness is to say it's not really about color as it is about power.
Power. That was going to be my next. That was going to be my next. Getting into that. Really, that's what all of this is about. All of this is about power and resources, right?
100%.
And we just observed, the 4th of July. And the narrative that doesn't get talked about with independence, was about resources. That's what it was about. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Being independent from Britain, so that the Americans who were living in America, could take land from indigenous people whenever they felt like it. You know what I'm saying? Without repercussions.
And that change is that, I think, to your point, slavery in America started off as an economic system.
Yeah.
However, it morphed into a social system. And it's the social system that we're dealing with because the society had to create narratives to support why you were inferior. And if we don't unpack the narrative of why it was important for us to be subhuman, it's so that the people who were abusing you could sleep peacefully at night.
Yeah.
They could sleep peacefully at night because you don't have to worry about if your cow is upset. You don't have to worry about if your dog, is not being treated right, because there's a cognitive disconnect. And we still have that disconnect, but what we put on it is a stamp of inclusion, a stamp of diversity, but we don't attack the thinking that led to that need for the first place.
Right. And like a lot of people don't understand like the need for affirmative action, or a lot of the civil rights legislation, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and things of that nature, was to prevent racists from being racist. I mean, that's really what it is. The Voting Rights Act, right?
Yes.
And I always try to say, man, Black people, we already had our voting rights in the 15th Amendment. It's just that states and society felt that they didn't need to honor it. You know what I'm saying? So we had to pass a Civil Rights Act in 1880. We had to pass another Civil Rights Act in 1965. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I think when you look at it, it goes back to, if you look at the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which said that separate but equal doctrine, the court said that it is not the job of the government to make me and you equal socially. It's not the government's responsibility to make you like me, or that ain't the job. And I think that idea is powerful when you take it to its logical conclusion. It's what is or what should be the role of government when it comes to social equality, because the people who you are talking to did not get social equality by asking for it, by voting, by legislation. Frederick Douglass said that man's rights lie in 3 boxes. You got the ballot box, you got the jury box, and the cartridge box. And so you want to pick a box.
Yeah.
And we've tried the ballot, because I don't think that the question becomes how do you get equality. The question becomes is how historically has anyone got equality? You don't get equality by asking for it. It's demanded.
It's demanded.
And there's consequences when you don't provide that equality. And I think for us, we have been, I think, socially conditioned to don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Right.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you. And I think that because we take that idea that we should be grateful, we should be humble. I've heard a lot of people make dumb arguments and say, you should be happy that you was brought here in chains because we got you Christianity, we civilized you savages, and we took you. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, this is the thinking. The thinking is that we did you a benefit. And I think that thinking is so poisonous because it has this idea of superiority in its claim that you were a savage. And I was benevolently, I took you out of Africa. I took you away from your, worshiping your wooden idols, and I brought you here. I gave you Christianity. I fed you. I clothed you. And now you have the audacity to want more.
Right.
More?
You don't like being on the bottom of this caste system?
And that's the challenge we're running into. And when you start to talk to people who see the unfolding, and I think that there is a great movement among white citizenry in America, those who don't not who may not acknowledge what we go through, but there's one thing I will say about whiteness in America is that there's solidarity among them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's solidarity, because when it comes to injustice, you have the few that will speak out, but for the most part, it's silence. Mm-hmm. And it's silence almost deafening. Mm-hmm. It's like, I hear what you're saying, but we're not as concerned. And I think that when we start talking about things that we are going to do to not change the society, I think that's the wrong goal. I think the idea is that you tell people this is a standard, this is how I will be treated. I think it's James Baldwin said it the best, man. He said, you have to tell the world how to treat you. Mm-hmm. If not, they will treat you any old kind of way.
That's true, though.
And I think that the court system in this country is when we talk about white supremacy and we talk about the pillars of white supremacy, I think we have to start with the branches of government and primarily the court system, because it has been the court that has always stymied progress.
Right.
It's been the court system. And I think that because the law was designed to protect people who are afraid of people, I think that that's why we don't see changes in our structures, because the fundamental fear of blackness, of black equality, of black social standing creates this fear in whiteness that will make them resort back to the behavior that got this land in the first place.
Yeah, man. What's up, JY?
Man, nothing much, man. Dr. Ham, man, welcome. Yah'm saying podcast, man, and glad to have you, man. And look, I sit back and I listen to you, you talk, and of course, my bro. I sit back and listen. I was like, man, I can't wait till y'all two get together, because boy, y'all be sitting here throwing flames.
That's what I told Dr. Ham. I was like, yeah, I was like, my bro excited to have you, man. So I appreciate you having this, man, coming on, bro. And then hopefully come on a few more times, man. So, but Jay, did you have any questions or thoughts or anything?
So I'm late to the conversation. I apologize. You had to get some paint for the house.
Hey, man, home ownership is,
Yeah. So I didn't know where y'all let off in the conversation and so forth. But some of the things that we have been talking about the post-racial myths in America and so forth, and what we've been talking about was this myth and also Black conservatism, which plays into the myth of America, right? Which, as I'm listening to the tail end of your conversation, stymies progress for certain groups in this country that usually plague either Black or brown individuals. My question would be, what are the tenets that causes Black conservatives to either veer away from the racial group idea of progress? I think that's what my question is.
Tay, take them.
Hey, it's one of the things that we talk about, man. I think that Black conservatives, like, we have to understand, we have to break it down, right? Because there is a clear divergence that happens with Black conservatism. You had Black people, or you had conservatives who were Black, and we're talking Floyd McKissick. Shoot, I can't remember any names right now, but their primary concern was Black people. How do I get resources for Black people, right? Floyd McKissick wanted to build Soul City, North Carolina, specifically to be a Black town, to have Black resources, Black jobs, things of that nature. Affirmative action came about because of a Black conservative trying to get Black people to have contracts, government contracts. That was one of the ways that Black people, you know, built wealth, was or moved up to the middle class, was through the government and government contracts and things of that nature. When Trump starts running, or prior to Trump, it was like Obama, right? The Tea Party. You get the Tea Party movement. You get Herman Cain's and the I can't remember that general or that colonel, Black guy West or what.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get these individuals, they become Black conservatives. They become more concerned about their proximity to whiteness and to power, right, than they do about the concerns of Black people. So then they treat, you know, a Trump like a demigod, right? And then you get the rise of Candace Owens and Blexit and all these other things that are anti-Black. And I try to tell people all the time, conservatism, modern conservatism is anti-Black. It's built on being against the civil rights movement and being against the New Deal. But mainly that's what we're in like the 40th year of Ronald Reagan. I don't know when people gonna get tired of it, but you know what I'm saying. But it goes back to kind of what Dr. Hand was saying, talking about, like, you know, one of the issues coming out of the civil rights movement is that Black people didn't build power. We didn't build political power, and it cost us because of color blindness. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, there were Black people making money, moving into the middle class, moving into the suburbs and things of that nature, and they stopped being concerned, you know, about you know, building what Martin Luther King was trying to tell people. You know what I mean? Black folk, hey, you need to build. Don't buy Tide, go buy this other Black brand. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, you know, there is that. You know, I think that there is just today's conservative is concerned with culture wars. They're concerned with, you know, things that don't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then you bring this issue of, you know, me, I always start with the plantation first. Because you have to know how the plantation was run to understand why would a Black person want to conserve anything here. I want to burn down the plantation house, and you want to put the fire out because you live there. You eating good at the master's house. And so the Black conservative understands two fundamental things. One, I'm going to eat better in the master's house. He knows that. There's better chicken in the master's house. And so what the master has to do is he has to provide incentive for a small minority of Black people to come into the house so that the other Black folks get mad at him and not the master. And so the Black conservative and this is the boule. This is the rise of the boule, because the first middle class Black people in America were the pastors, the preachers.
Yep.
The preacher was the first middle class in America, because they were the ones who the master entrusted on the plantation to tell the other enslaved people about humility, about Christ, and about servitude, and slave obey your master. So when they took that position, it gave them power over other Black folks. And they used that power over other Black folks to essentially allow the class to perpetuate itself. And so when you start to look at, I would say in the last maybe 70 years, that the party switch, what I've seen happening is that the Black conservative, and I think this is where I like to say the idea that the Black conservative is self-interest motivated, because they have to scapegoat Black culture for their rise. See, if you were a Black conservative that was consistent, I would understand that. If you can be a Black conservative and have problem with white supremacy. See, you can say, hey, white supremacy is a problem, and I wouldn't say that it's holding everybody down, but I can be philosophically consistent when I can't talk about this issue in the Black community. I can't talk about police brutality as a Black conservative because it will alienate my white audience.
Right.
I'm like, look, be a Black conservative and talk about all the issues. But when they bring out the Black folks, the conservatives, to say ain't no problems here, now I got a problem with you.
Yeah.
Because my problem is that, yes, because you eating good at the master's table. But there's an argument to be made about self-interest and Maslow's hierarchy of need, because I think that when it comes to one of the biggest divisions that we have, and it goes back to meritorious manumission. There was 3 ways an enslaved person could be granted freedom. There was only 3 ways. The first way is if you save the life of a white man. Okay. Second way is if you invented something that made that white man money, meaning your labor, hey, you was a good shoemaker and he could lend you out to somebody else. You made enough money, you get your free. And the third reason, and it's still happening today, is if I tell on a black person that's trying to escape. If I rat you out, if I drop a dime on you and say, hey, master, at 20 o'clock, Toby about to run away, he would say, thanks, thanks for letting me know he's about to run away. Now, here's your extra piece of chicken. You can now I'm gonna send you among the black folks.
Well, does that chicken come with a biscuit?
Oh, but I'm gonna send you among the black folks so that you can know the rumblings of them. So when they're discontent, when they're planning something, you are my agent. And I think that the black conservative is an agent to say things to black folks that white folks can't say. Because if a white folk came out and said some of the things these black conservatives would say, they wouldn't have a platform.
Yeah. And that's where Tim Scott comes in. Tim Scott pushes a lot of the post-racial, he always bring it cotton to Congress, you know what I'm saying? Push this post-racial myth. Because race still matters in America. If it didn't, we wouldn't have filled it out on the census, right? And the census would not lead to money, right? And you know what I mean? And it doesn't lead, and there's power that's connected to it. You know what I'm saying? There's resources that's connected to it. You know what I'm saying? So, and like you saying, an individual like Tim Scott, his job is to present himself, right? Because we got to remember race is about individuality, and it's always why, when you get like some racist person, well, I mean, Michael Jordan made it. Why didn't you make it?
Yeah.
Oprah Winfrey made it. Why didn't you make it? You know what I'm saying? And without understanding, caste system and not understanding the context within resources and who gets and who has and who does not have resources, you know what I'm saying? And I think that we're seeing today, just seeing the backlash of that black man and his black wife being in that White House. And that's what we're seeing, a backlash to, and people are also seeing black people, moving into the suburbs and having, better jobs, their children going to colleges and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's why we see a lot of these issues and changes and stuff. Yeah. What's this? Oh, black conservatives. Yeah.
So everything that you guys are talking about, right? The conservatives are now pushing back on Tim Scott about colorblindness message, because again, they are starting to understand the difference in within their party, that it's racialized. And some of the things that I want to pose questions about is how the miseducation of black conservative or leftist blacks have either created issues for the black community or have progressed through black community. What are some of the tenets that we're starting to see on either side that benefit black communities?
Man, the Congressional Black Caucus in the 1960s and 70s supported the war on drugs, not knowing that it was going to be directed at black folks. Some of them have come out and apologized, Clyburn and all those who were in Congress then, because they told a lie to black people. They said, if you want economic opportunity in your community, it has to be safe. Now, the premise of that is legit, but they didn't tell them that as a result of it being safe, what needed to happen is that when you started to police our communities and over-police our communities, you started to see this, I think, a backlash of black politicians who only serve white interests, to be clear. So you're black in color only with a BICO. You are black in color only because you do not serve a black agenda. You serve a white agenda that you get power from. And you have to go and sell to black folks the white agenda. Now that creates what Du Bois called a double consciousness. Meaning I have to look at the poverty in my community and go tell them something else. Because I have to tell them this myth of individualism, because that's one of the biggest lies we tell each other. We do not live in an individual society.
Right.
Power is collective.
Right.
Power gathers together. And even if you don't see the power, it's working because the idea of race was for a power dynamic.
Right.
And they understood something very, very fundamentally, is that this system don't work if I don't have black actors that can sell this program to other black people. And I think that's where we're seeing today is that we no longer are accepting what you're trying to sell us, because first we are educated. We understand that the things that you are telling us to do in our community, you're not saying to any other community. You're telling us things to do that you ain't telling nobody else to do. And I'm like, well, be consistent with me, because if you're going to lie to me, at least, you know, in the olden days, you could lie to somebody and it could take months or years if we figured it out. Now we can call you out on the spot, and we can say that we're seeing the tale of two cities. I think that's what America is. It's the haves and the have-nots before you even get into race. And I think when you start talking about resources and you start talking about how they will be allocated, the black conservative knows that if you adopt their thinking on, let's say, social conservative, I'm socially conservative, fiscally I'm liberal, or vice versa, you have to say that I have to take the stuff that I don't want in order to get the stuff that I think I need. Meaning I have to take the statistics that say, you know, why the infant mortality rate is high in black women. I have to just accept that. That's just not an outcome of the system. That's just the way it is. And I think that is what is causing the most discrepancy with the black conservative is their inconsistency and the general idea that we are being educated now to say, look, we've tried it your way, and all it has produced for us is more of the same. And you don't have an agenda or even a plan that is going to allow us to change anything except for a few tokenisms,
you
know, to get by.
Yeah, man. I think that part of this post-racial myth is that not understanding that systems impact people. Systems has outcomes. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Systems have outcomes. So when you pass a law and that law has an outcome, it has a positive or negative outcome, and it is going to affect you based on gender, based on race, you know, based on ethnicity, based on environment, based on all these things. And when you promote this idea of post-racial, you know what I mean, you're saying that the systems have equal outcomes, and it just doesn't. You know what I mean? So, you know, the part of the issue with the black conservative is like you're saying, they don't want to acknowledge that some of these systems need to get torn down and built back up, right? That's what Martin Luther King was talking about, right? Like, hey, look, we need to guarantee healthcare. We need to guarantee child care. We need to guarantee these things so that there can be equality, some equality. You won't have full equality, right? It will never be 50-50, but as close to as you can, you know what I'm saying? And again, when you have a black conservative that's like Tim Scott talking about cutting taxes for the wealthy, and when he gets in office, he's going to implement some CRT legislation or some crap that he wants to do. You know what I mean? He's saying that he understands race has an outcome, because if you cut taxes, well, who is the racial group that benefits the most? You know what I'm saying? There are not that many black millionaires, even though there is more. There's not that many of them. You know what I'm saying? There's most definitely not that many black billionaires. You know what I mean? In America. So, you know, and then when you look at class, I mean, you look at class in economics, you know, or look at class, there's you know, some mediocre, you know, person that lives in a trailer, fist, you know, pom pom cheering the affirmative action, you know, measure. Meanwhile, he living in a trailer and black people moving into $200, $300, $400 homes. You know what I'm saying? Getting six-figure jobs, sending their kids to college and things of that nature. And this, in spite of, right? We weren't going out here like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna find a place where, you know, where affirmative action, and I'm gonna have to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, no, we were already progressing and making progress. And then, so, you know, the black conservative just continues this myth. You know what I mean? That systems don't have outcomes, and systems do have outcomes. You know?
Oh yeah,
man.
Man,
yeah.
Y'all setting some things on fire right now. Some of the other conversation that we were having, you know, we were diving into the 1980 conference of black conservatives, which was led by, after doing some research, you know, the Heritage Foundation, and a few other conservative groups. So some of the things that we were talking about was the fact that these issues, or our conversations that we talk to, have two different pillars. It's a race conversation and it's a class conversation. That we have. Yeah. And this is the intersectionality of this conversation, that if you talk to a black conservative, they seem to miss these dynamics, that you are getting information that is received from a predominantly white racial group that is funding the information that's being passed down to then a higher class of black conservatives that's then giving, you know, passing it on to the lower class of black conservatives.
Yeah, and I, you know, I make a point. I don't talk about individuals, politicians, or anything. I only deal with ideas. I'm only concerned with the ideas that you are saying, so I can counteract the idea. Because if I can counteract the idea, I don't have to deal with you. You need a new argument, I don't. And I think that when you start to look at the idea is to bog you down in foolish arguments. This dude said, well, if you just stop talking about racism, it'll just go away. And I'm like, what else do we say that about? If we stop talking about cancer, does it go away? Like, what other arguments do we make? Well, it's only here because you're talking about it. Well, I'm talking about it because it exists. And if you don't, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. Louis Brandeis said that, man. You need sunlight. And for so long, we've been in the darkness of ideas, because the idea holders have told us that this is the acceptable way to talk about these issues. Well, we're saying, no, you don't determine how we talk about what we talk about. We say it how we want to say it. And this is why, you know, I look at, you know, Dr. Francis Quest Wilson, Neely Fuller. You're talking about a system that involves economics, education, academics, entertainment, law, labor, politics, religion, sex, war, and Dr. Cresswell added health into that. So when any pillar is attacked, the others come to its defense. So, for example, right now, we are attacking the academic pillar with CRT. We're attacking it. So what's coming in? The law pillar is now coming in to help out the academic, because we beat it up. We just chilling out. And so critical race theory was just the beginning step. It was just a framework to define a phenomenon. But the next step is to dismantle something. Critical race theory was not created to dismantle anything. It's created to identify something.
Exactly.
And once it's identified, now we have to create a framework that goes beyond CRT into to be operational level. You know how you got the strategic plan, operational, the tactical. See, critical race theory is a strategic idea, but it has to be operationalized. And I think that when you start talking about economics first, what you see happening is this. And King said it the best. He said, look, when it was free, when it was easy, when voting rights was easy, that ain't cost nothing.
Right.
That didn't cost nothing to get voting rights. It didn't cost nothing to let you sit on that bus. And then the question then becomes, why were we so concerned about integrating into society that didn't want us there? We don't deal with that fundamental question of assimilationism. I don't want to talk like you. I don't want to dress like you. I want to wear my hair the way I want to wear my hair. I want to use my slang, and I want to be accepted. But I think that what we found out is that the assimilation doesn't work because they can just move the bar. Mm-hmm. They could just move the bar. You want me to wear suspenders? Now I wear a tie. Now I got a belt. Now I got this. And I'm always trying to catch up to where you are going. And the idea that the whiteness has become the default standard for anything is a problem that needs to be challenged. Because when you start to look at what we have created and what we have done, when you highlight our contributions here, not only do you see this idea that, one, we're not a monolithic people. Mm-hmm. I think our greatest strength is the idea that if you want to be a Black conservative, well, go be one. Mm. But don't come to the cookout. Yeah. Keep it 100. If you Black and you want to go back to Africa and you think that Africa and you want to go back, go back. Mm-hmm. If you Black and you want to stay and assimilate, then stay and assimilate. Mm-hmm. But we have to stop creating an idea where we all have to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Because those who will stay behind or those who are on your side will have solidarity with you. Mm-hmm. They'll say, I support the one thing that the Black people have never had in this country is self-determination. Right. You know, they did not ask Black people after the Civil War if we wanted to be citizens here. Yeah. Nobody asked us. And last time I checked, you cannot enter into a contract without your agreement. So citizenship was given to you, and nobody said, I'm good. I don't want citizenship. But at the same time, I want to be like the Indians here. I want to give me my reservation on my land. Leave me alone. Let us govern ourselves. Mm-hmm. Those options were never provided to us. And I think that's a good option. If you Black, you want the option, go forward. But no matter what you do, I'm going to support you because I believe that that's the one thing that we lack the most is a diversity of I don't have to agree with your idea to support your outcome.
Right. As long as we're going in the same direction.
I support that. Right. And the same thing with the conservative. If you want to be Black conservative, I support that. Just keep it consistent.
Yeah.
Keep it 100. And don't try to play both sides of the fence. Don't try to say because you got Black skin that you can come over here and now talk to us and then go back over there and go report everything we said. Like that's not 100, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to chime in because my thoughts are we have this thing with Black conservatives is when you're talking about ideas is the problem when the argument becomes about left, right, Black conservatives and so forth is one half is presenting a actual idea of thoughts of how they go about a systematic way of thinking or to attack a issue or a problem where what we're seeing with Black conservatives, when you talk about any issue, it's never a solution.
Oh,
it's just grievances.
They can diagnose with the best of them.
Yeah.
But they, it's like when you go to the gym and the guy tell you overweight, but he ain't got no plan for you to lose no weight. He ain't got no dietitian plan for you. He ain't got no eating strategy for you. He just say you overweight. And I think that's a great point you just made, man, because they're great at that. They're great at telling you that, oh man, it's those single family Black households, it's those moms. And I'm like, bruh, you're beating the broken drum. But I will say this: the intellectual rigor of the older Black conservatives, like Thomas Sowell, at least, I mean, they were disingenuous, but at least they made better arguments. They made better arguments than the conservatives today, because I think the arguments that they made was that I could sit on a show with Milton Friedman and co-sign what he says, not knowing that the only reason as a Black conservative that I have a platform right now is because I need validity from somebody who doesn't look like me to co-sign my idea. You're a co-signer. And so when you look at the first Black conservative, let's go back 100 years. The first Black conservatives started off and they learned something very early on. They learned that addressing the grievances of Black people will not get them an audience.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, they all started that way. Every Black conservative started off with trying to address the grievance of Black folks. But what they realized is as they started to get more power, the white power structure embraced them and said, let's come over here. Let me talk to you about the issues of the community. And you know what? Here's $100,000 to go and implement one of your strategies. Oh, thank you, sir. Okay, now let's say that's what Du Bois said. Du Bois said, I wasn't part of NAACP. I was a token Negro. That's what he said. He said, I was just there to put a Black face on this organization. That's all I was there for. And you look at Booker T. Washington. You know, I would say Booker T. Washington's ideas in the Black community are still prevalent today. He died in 1915, but his thoughts are still being challenged. He said, listen, Black folks, as long as you don't want equality with these white folks and you will work and you will be industrious and you work good with your hands, eventually you're going to be accepted into society. And he said that because he went after, when he was raised, he went to a school, Hampton University, and he got handouts and he got taken care of by white benefactors. So when he started Tuskegee, no Black people funded Tuskegee Institute. Tuskegee was funded by white folk.
Yeah.
And you think they were gonna let him have a pro-Black agenda? Come on. You think JP Morgan would have been giving him money to talk about Black empowerment? No. He said, look, teach these Negroes how to work with their hands and be industrious. And that's why all our HBCUs started off as land-grant colleges, you know, Agriculture and Technology Institute. Because that's what they want us to do. But then Du Bois said, listen, we need to be educated classically. We need to learn the class. We need to read Homer and Shakespeare. We need to understand the governments. And that's why they talk about Frederick Douglass, but don't talk about Martin Delany. If you talk about Martin Delany, then you got another discussion. We got another discussion we got to have. Because Martin Delany was a Black nationalist. He was like, we need to have our own stuff. And I think his thought is so pervasive. And that's why you don't see the history taught from the idea that the only thing that Black people in America I see that needs to be conserved here, there's a very small list. There's a very small list of things that we need to conserve here. And on that list is the idea that you can be Black and you can essentially assimilate here, or you can be Black and be discontent here. Like, you don't have to be happy here. You don't have to be like, oh man, I'm happy I got America. It's like, no, I got solidarity with diaspora. And just because there's 44 million of us here and we are the largest group outside of Brazil, we're the largest group of Black folks in the diaspora. And if you go to any of these other places, the only thing that separates us is we don't speak the same language, but we got the same conditions.
Right. Yeah, man. And I'll say, you know, we're here talking about this post-racial myth in America, and you can't talk about post-racial myth without talking about race in America, man. Race is still prevalent in America. It is an important factor, you know, in America. So that's what we're talking about. You know, and part of that is, you know, one of those things that try to, you know, raise people's antennas, you know, especially Black people, and understanding that we are an ethnic group in America. We are first an ethnic group that is racialized. You know what I'm saying? And people need to understand that. You know, and I want to go back to you know, one of the you know, the Congressional Black Caucus was their original ethos, right? Their original, or they still have the same ethos. We don't have any permanent friends, we don't have permanent enemies, we have permanent interests. We haven't been saying that, we haven't been promoting that. Well, and a lot of it is because, you know, a lot of it is because we haven't moved as a power block, a power dynamic. You know what I mean? Our voting participation does this. You know,
why do you think that is though?
Like not as a voting block, or not as a power dynamic.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Man, I think that is, you know, I think a lot of it goes back to apathy. I think that there was some apathy created within the system. People got disenchanted with, the system. So as Black people are going, into the 80s and going into, recession, there's Black people being laid off, of course, have high unemployment rates, 16-20% or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And then going through the war on drugs. You know what I mean? I think on and on and on. They just see, I think Martin Luther King talked about it. Like when people live like in despair, and that's all they see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Then they can't, see anything else outside of that. You know what I'm saying? So, I think it's just been apathy. You know what I'm saying? That's been created when it comes to voting power, and not in a lack of understanding voting power. Black people show up every 4 years. We don't show up in between, and that's what has led to this moment where we are today, where voting rights get gutted in 2012, where affirmative action gets gutted, Roe v. Wade. I'm not saying it's Black people's fault. Yeah. I'm saying what I'm saying is that we now live. The majority of Black people live in the South, and we're now living in trifecta governments led by Republicans who are creating conditions to where we're living in right to work states, right? Right to work states is right to be poor states. That's what they are. You know what I'm saying? And so, I always say it, man, here in South Carolina, we got the worst stretch of 95. Like I-95 is the worst. Our I-95 is the worst stretch of I-95. But it's this mentality that, of not using the government to better people's lives. You know what I'm saying? So it's regional. You know what I'm saying? You see the money in Greenville and Charleston. Everywhere in between, you don't see it. But if you go everywhere in between, there's this message of, oh man, government interference and government this and government that. And it's like, well, how do you think these people are building homes? They're using the government. They know the city planner. They voted in as the city planner. They know the mayor. Like, what are you talking about? It just blows my mind, man. I think there's just a lack of civic engagement and understanding the power that you have and really in government. Like, you live in America, you're gonna be governed some sort of way. Yeah. And I'd rather vote somebody in that has similar interests to me rather than these nut jobs who think that Black people were taking advantage of affirmative action that we didn't deserve. You know what I'm saying? That's just my viewpoints on it. But yeah.
Oh yeah, like Donald Trump was just up towards picking counties.
Mm.
I go up towards Pickens County a lot because I like to fish up there. Never caught a fish, but that's a whole nother story. But when you go towards picking counties, man, you clearly see the haves and have-nots, and they in Pickens County, I think they're like about close to 70% white in Pickens County. And man, when I say they are poor, they are extremely poor, but they showed up. It's a town of 3,000 people. About 5,000 people showed up. And this is a prime example. And bro, we talked about it earlier, where the mediocrity of so many poor white people that have wealth because they own the land, that don't know how to extract the wealth from the land to use their whiteness to get ahead and achieve the very thing that they complain about when you're talking about watching African Americans or Spanish people climb up the economic ladder. So they blame it on things like affirmative action.
Must be affirmative action. That's what
Yeah. But not their mediocrity of not knowing how, one, government operates, two, how to use government, which they know how to use it when it comes to violence,
right?
Or implementing their power to implement violence,
or to remain mediocre. Remain mediocre. Don't have to do anything.
Which allows them to not show up to any poll in local elections or federal elections to argue about the low wages in their county.
Yeah. Go ahead, Doc.
And the one thing I told you before, I start off with, the one thing that all Black people have in common. I think that we start off with this idea that first off, we are a shared trauma group. I mean, if you look at our culture, it was from trauma. Yeah. Our cuisine came from trauma. Our music comes from trauma. Our slang came from trauma. This is why we, if there's injustice, we can all get together when the police kill somebody quickly because we are trauma response people. I see trauma, it activates the trauma in me that relates to trauma in you. We have instant solidarity. And so this is where it's interest convergence. My interest and your interest have to converge. Mm-hmm. And in America, there is one interest that will never converge here. That's white acceptance of Black solidarity. It will never converge. Never. And the reason I say never, and this is what Dr. Bell, the founder of critical race theory, said, he said the preeminence of it is based on this idea that my interest will only converge with yours if you will benefit from it. This is why, yes, I will support a program, and this is the Black politician. Yes, I will not support a program that's pro-Black. I will support a program that's pro-everybody, because then I can get the buy-in from the people to converge our interests together. Say, look, well, this is going to benefit everybody, but of course it's going to benefit these demographics more than those. And every time we happen to live in a generation of interest convergence. What we are seeing happening now is interest divergence. Mm. It's what happens when you have prolonged benign neglect. People stop caring and thinking about you. You're not on anybody's radar anymore. You're not even concerned. And so this is where I see happening is that the myth of the colorblind added with interest divergence will create the very same reasons they don't want you learning about your history, because they plan on doing that same history to you now. Like they plan on redoing that. And they don't want you to know that this is what they have already done. And we talk about, the Cold War civil rights. It was not benevolence in this country that created equality for Black folks. It wasn't us marching. They don't care about us marching. They don't care about us protesting. They don't care about none of that, because they know once we go back home, it ain't going to change. What they cared about is the strategic interest of the Soviet Union and China. Because every time there's police brutality in America, it's on state TV in China. And they're telling the Chinese, look at how America treats these Negroes. In Russia, everywhere around the world, when we are mistreated, they are showing it to their people to say, this is how they treat them. That's why we got social progress in the 60s, because we were a liability to this country. We were disaffected, we were jaded, and we were angry, and we needed something to take our frustration out on. And you know who was there to help us out? Why do you think Angela Davis went to Germany to go study? Why do you think the boys went to Russia? Why do you think Richard Wright and Baldwin,
Robeson,
they had to go overseas because they were getting an education to take back to here to mobilize us. And the government had to counteract that threat because the interests did not converge, because they were going to give them not weapons, they were going to give them weapons and how to fight our systems of oppression. And I think when you start to look at this idea of going overseas, and one of the things is these countries don't care about us as Black people. They don't care about us individually. They care about America falling. Mm-hmm. They care about destroying America. And if I was an adversary of America, what would I do? I would tell the people you're colorblind, and I would foment dissension among you. I would. And I would just sit back and watch you guys destroy yourself, eat popcorn. Look at them. We ain't got to fight these dudes.
Yeah, they're going to fight each other.
And I think therein is the only convergence, is that internationally, prior to the Iraq war, we had the just war theory, meaning we wanted to be viewed as the good guys internationally. Mm-hmm. The Iraq war blew that myth up. That was about oil and everything like that. So once we didn't care about how we were looked at internationally anymore, once we didn't care about the African countries anymore, then we were like, well, wait a minute. If we don't care about our perception, we can go back treating these Negroes like trash. Essentially, we got to give them nothing. They don't expect nothing. And now when you start to look at why these Republicans are on the side of Putin, and look, I swear they be on Putin's side, because they understand it's called The Racial Contract. It's a really good book. Essentially, the only reason that Hitler got in trouble because he was killing the white folk. If Hitler did what Leopold did, was killing Africans, Britain and France would left him alone. But you can't kill their own, because they understood that our interests converged here, and you every now and again, if you're making too much black progress in America, you have to throw the racists a bone, because they'll get restless. They'll do the January 6th real world.
January 6th, exactly. Yep.
But I told them January 6th was the appetizer. That was just the appetizer. If you want to see, like, if you ever wonder what a lynching was like in America of a black person, that was the energy that day. That spirit, that energy is still here. All it has to take is to get riled up to them feel they're losing something, and you're taking it from them, and they will go in that building, take that Confederate flag, and wave it through the halls, because they understand that eventually, that even the court knows this, that when you make progress too quickly here, there's going to be a backlash. And I think that's what we're seeing now with these court cases. This is the backlash. This is the carrots for the racists to say, hey, look, we ain't forgot about you. We still here. We got your back. Don't worry about it. They got some progress. We're going to stamp that down real fast, because once you start to mix, I told them there's two great accelerants that are about to hit this country. When you mix the great replacement theory with economic instability in America, you're going to see violence that you've never seen in our lifetime. Because when it comes about resources, you're going to see this white nationalism that's been coming up.
That's popping up.
This white Christian nationalism. Because when you start to believe, and that's why I was telling about this one, man. We don't talk about the black church role in white supremacy. We don't. But if we don't talk about the role that the black church plays in white supremacy, we are mistaken. Because the black church serves the same function in our community that the drug dealer does. They have the same purpose. They provide an opioid. You do not concern yourself with what's going on in the world. That's it. And the only difference is that the black church not just takes your money, but that's a whole other issue, because I don't want to get about Umar Johnson tip. If you took your Jesus money and put it in, and so when we don't talk about the role that the black church has played in the colorblindness of this country, then we'll have to understand that they have created a system where the only reason that the black church is not interrupted by the white power structure because it is not a threat.
And I'm going to hit you with Dr. Umar. Isn't it suspicious?
Don't just I agree with probably 90% Umar. I'm not on him with the whole because I think that when it comes to our community, we have to start doing what the white community does when we disagree with each other. See, if me and you disagree, I ain't got to tell nobody about it. I can disagree with you, and then the stuff we support, I'll support that. And the stuff I don't disagree with you on, I'll leave it alone. Because that's what they do. When it comes to Trump, they don't talk about his Confederate flag and his racism. They don't talk about how he said Haiti's a shithole country. Like what? They don't talk about let's send people from Norway. They don't talk about it. They talk about the tax policy. They talk about what they agree with. And I think as a community, one of our biggest weaknesses is we have to confront or air our disagreements with each other in an open forum.
Right.
And I think that's not the forum for that. The forum for that is when we are on our one-on-one, outside the public sphere. What did Chris Rock say? My mama said, don't fight in front of white folks. And we have to take that mentality to heart, because they don't fight in front of us.
And
nobody arguing who's better, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. They arguing. They both billionaires. But we sit here like, who's better, LeBron or who cares? They're both great.
Okay.
But that's the concern we have in our community, is that we have to learn that I can disagree with you without being disagreeable to our cause. Because that will create division among us that we don't need.
Right.
Because we got enough. We have enough forces against us without squabbling over should you date a white woman or a black woman.
Yeah, right. Like, and I say that, man. I'm like, man, I swear to God, if I hear one more relationship podcast, somebody share one more. I'm telling you, man, I'm tired of seeing it. I'm tired of seeing them, man.
Everybody has an opinion on how black folks should live.
Yeah.
How black relationships, what black women should be doing. Do we see this in any other community?
Do
we see it anywhere?
No, we don't have those conversations about power, because guess what? The conservatives have that conversation. They had it on Rush Limbaugh. They have it on Fox News. They have it on Hannity. They have it on Carlson. They have it on Ben Shapiro. Like it goes on and on. That's ad nauseum. It is the same message across the board, where they have this message on. Oh, okay, that's how we need to move. That's how we need to gain power.
Yes.
We don't have that. We don't have, like, we like shy away from having these type of conversations a lot of times.
And that goes to the plantation, because the primary purpose of education is how to deal with power. If you don't teach someone how to deal with power, you've educated them to fail, because no one who benefits from your ignorance has any incentive to educate you. I tell you all the time, you will not see a German teaching Chinese children their history. You will not see somebody from Haiti teaching the children in India their history. You won't, because it's your responsibility. And I think we have deferred to people who have an incentive or ignorance to educate us.
Right.
And that's the dangerous situation, because that's what Cargie Woodson was talking about, the miseducation of the Negro. And I think that the plantation mentality is so dangerous. And I say this because a lot of black people that I talk to don't really know how a plantation was operated. They don't know how it was operated. How was control kept? And it wasn't the job of the master to keep the plantation under control. It wasn't his job. And I think that when you start to talk about the plantation thinking, how to change it, I think it starts off with the counter narrative. The counter narrative is that, first off, I cannot serve a God that you serve if your God allows you to treat me this way. As a black community, we have to say that. I can't allow myself to serve the God that you serve if you think that you treat me this way is okay. But we don't think that way. We were conditioned to believe that the whites were our masters, our gods. Because remember, didn't they say it? Who do rights come from? God, right? Who gave us our rights here?
Then they moved to Lincoln, and then it goes on and on.
Yeah. And we have to, and so until we reject the idolatry, because that's what it is, it's idolatry. Because just how black people have that plantation mentality, white folks have it too. It's epigenetically trait. You think 400 years of slavery only affected us? No, it affected them too. That's all that Karen is. Karen is, I was on the plantation, I could do this. I'm mad at Katie. And when we start to dissect that mentality, I would say it's so problematic, because my new question I ask everybody, this is my new question, because I say, when did you get off the plantation? Because there's this idea in America that we all left the plantation on the same day. Like we all just, we free. And it's like, no, you have black people who own plantations in the 1960s, literally on the same plantation where their mamas and grandfathers died. And then you have black folks who in the 1860 census were free. There was almost 500,000 black folks that were free. And then you got those black folks who had 100-year head start, looking at the black folks that got off the plantation 20 years ago and saying, why ain't you made progress? I'm like, seriously, bro, Keep it 100, man. And I think that's so unfortunate amongst us, because unless you know the day you left the plantation, and I'll speak for myself, man. I was on the plantation for a long time. Just recently got off. Just recently got off. I just recently left the plantation, and I didn't realize I was on it. And that was the dangerous thing about it, because I didn't realize I was on it, because it was conditional responses. It was internalized oppression. It was like, not what's wrong with you, what happened to you first. You start off with that question, and I think that's the unfortunate part. It's a lot of these Black conservatives, especially today, they got off the plantation real early. If you look at Blanche Bruce, look at if somebody said, who was the first senator that was enslaved in America, that wasn't, parents were not enslaved, because we start to think that the first Black representatives were all slaves.
Also,
they were not. They were, most of them were freed or had a white parent, or were educated in the North
because they could read.
They could read. And so when we start to look at that, I say, look, that's why Carter G. Woodson is so powerful, because he's the first Black dude whose parents were enslaved to get a PhD from Harvard. Now Du Bois was free up north. He got his earlier, but you see the challenges though, and I find that we're measuring each other from a starting point that's arbitrarily determined by people who think that you all got free the same date, and we didn't. And we got knowledge at different dates, and we're using that knowledge to go back to those people who are still on the plantation, because the plantation is not a physical piece of land anymore.
Right.
This is the plantation
mentality.
And until we get out of that mentality, we're only going to be dealing with systems and their outcomes, and not going to the source of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, bro. Sound like you wanna.
No, man, I'm sitting here listening, but I'm also pondering a few things, man, because the question that you asked about when did you get off the plantation, right? Man, and like now I'm like grappling with some thinking, because I'm thinking back to, as I'm just sitting here running the streets and all the other stuff in my 20s and all the other stuff and what I'm doing in my community, and not thinking about the effects that I am putting upon my own people.
Yes.
It is the plantation thinking. And man, I could remember back in probably my late 20s, where I started kind of telling my friends, like, hey man, I got married, and like now I'm just gonna focus on my kids. I'm gonna focus on my life. I'm gonna focus on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go to your club. I don't want to hang out. But I didn't put the pieces together until late into my 30s, where now was about understanding political power.
Yeah.
And now, like, you know, when I'm talking with my friends, like when they bring up something, I interject something that has something to do with political power.
Yeah.
And for them to understand that our basic survival is surrounded around politics. Whether as soon as you open the door and you step on your sidewalk, you're dealing with politics. So now you have to understand your power with other people in your community, and especially when you're talking about living in, you know, we consider it the hood. This is what you want to sit back and talk about. You want to know why it's drugs in your community? Well, that's politics. You know, you want to know why the homes are ran down in your community? That's politics. You want to know why, you know, you can't get business funding in your community? It's politics. All of these different things made me really think back that, man, I was walking off the plantation in my 30s. I just never crossed the line, boss. You know what I'm saying? And I finally crossed the line.
Yeah.
And you know, like people when I'm talking to especially Black people and so forth, my children and so forth, we have to understand what white supremacy has done to us.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, man. And it has corrupted
and it's doing.
And
it's doing.
Yeah.
Because the continuation of a process, it didn't just die away, it just became insidious. And that's why they had to write. So I have to write a policy, and I have to write in a race neutral tone, but I need to make sure that it has the effects that I want it to. And I need to make sure that I can use words like the GI Bill is a great example. The GI Bill was not written race, it was written race neutral.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, let's implement the GI Bill at the state level, not the federal level, because they knew the states would segregate, integrate. They knew that the states would mess it up and not give it to black folks. So that's what I mean. And I think that when you say politics, I think Clausewitz, man, he says that, you know, we don't view ourselves as prisoners of war here. No. But Clausewitz said politics is war by other means. War is possible by other means. So we have been prisoners. I think that we don't look at ourselves as POWs. And if we did, we'd have a different mentality. Because first off, the conditioning that you do to a prisoner is Stockholm syndrome. When you fall in love with your captor, well, they abuse me, but they feed me. So, hey, you know, and every now and again, they let me have some ice cream. And I think that when you start to look, and this is that powernomics to the point, you know, Dr. Anderson talks about, you know, I find myself having to critique strategies for our community that are how to say it? They are well intended but not practical. That makes sense. Like that's a good idea, but that's not real. It's not realistic. You know, it's not. But then, now, and I find that when I do this, I try to do it from a non-cynical perspective. I'm an idealist, but I'm pragmatic.
Be pragmatic, yeah. That's what I'm
pragmatic. And I'm thinking to myself, like, we're not going to all come together as black people and sing "Kumbaya" and have a big. It's not realistic. I think what is realistic, though, is identifying strategies that, first off, will be effective, but I would say not necessarily effective to us as a community, in the sense that we don't know. I would say when it comes to community, no one really told us outside of after integration, I would say, because we thought we had communities during segregation. But I would say no, because the white folks are coming and burn it up. So what the community did. If you live in fear of being, you know, destroyed, your community never developed, and that's when, you know, the Deacons for Defense came up. The black, so your community without defense is not a community. It's just an opportunity waiting for somebody to take it. And because we've understood this idea of not thinking strategically in our planning, we start thinking, well, all I got to do is just get some money, and my problems will be solved here. It's like, no, that's short-sighted.
Yeah,
that's short-sighted, because a fool and his money are very quickly departed. Because I would tell you that's why, you know, Jay-Z ain't wearing gold chains no more. Because he understands that when I go from the plantation, and I think this is where the opulent piece comes from. I'd say this: who taught you how to raise free children? How do you raise a free child? Who taught you?
Nobody. Yeah.
Well, the reason nobody taught you because nobody who raised you was free.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody who raised you was free.
Not to cut you out there, Doc. I'm sorry, Doc, but that was a point in Isabella Wilkinson's book. She also has a book called Caste, and it talks about how each generation doesn't raise free children. We raise our children in the caste system because, hey, look, this is how Emmett Till gets murdered, right?
Yep.
He comes from Chicago, but there's rules down here in the South. You know what I'm saying? His parents was raising him, without understanding the rules in the South versus the rules up north. You know, I'm pretty sure his mom probably said, "Hey, look, when you go down there, you get off the sidewalk, you don't look people in the face. You know what I'm saying? And you just raise this generation, you know, in the caste system. And then when the kid gets murdered wearing the hoodie, what were black parents telling, you know, their kids? I don't want you wearing hoodies anymore.
Yep. Barry Bond.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I'm sorry, man. I mean to cut you off.
Tamir Rice. You can't play with a toy gun in the park no more.
But
so one of the things that I think that we're seeing is that, and this is what I do, man. I like to quantify our stories and look at them from a intergenerational lens. So I say, what did Black parents in the 1850s tell their children about dealing with the police? What did they tell them? Well, you gotta go to the slave narratives. You got to go into the narratives of what was the common thing that was taught, right? And then somebody would say, well, what has fundamentally changed from today? What my difference is? What has fundamentally changed?
Not much.
Not much. But
the technology.
But on the margins, it's our understanding of what the police were designed to do. Because I think the most glaring disparity in our country, apart from economics, because economics is unquestionably despairing.
Right.
I think it's like, and I tell people, I said, policing in America is either done for you or it's done for you. Now, those sound similar, but they're dramatically different.
Yeah.
Because policing in your Black, it's the policing is done for you. You are policed. I tell people now, if you go back to history of this country, there was no police force in America that was designed for white folks. Not one. Not one police force was designed for white folks in America. And if you start to look at what and now policing is done for, because when we don't, there's two things that are coming ahead. Is that one, because Black folks in America were bred to be bigger, faster, stronger genetically. You know, that's Dr. Francois. We were bred to be bigger and stronger.
Jimmy the Greek said that. That's what got him fired. ESPN.
This creates a fear in the people who have an inherited fear of us. We don't talk about the fear of Blackness in this country or the perception of Blackness. We don't. And because we don't do it, we don't understand how it affects our public policy. I tell people, it's not a coincidence that the 911 system in America was created in 1968 in the Civil Rights Movement. No. You had all these Black folks who could do free movement, and it caused fear. It was terrorizing, because if I was a Black person in a white neighborhood, I was suspicious by default. What are you doing here? And in a culture of people who are not seeing Black folks in white space. And this is a challenge, because when you say white space, I didn't understand what that meant. It's a space where white folks feel that they can be free to say what they want about Black folks in. And then you have people who think this way. They think that, yes, I can say what I want to say because I'm in my, some people call it a safe space. But when you start to look at how our society is developed, the reason that we are over-policed, the reason that we have these issues in our community is because we have never dealt with the psychological programming from Birth of a Nation, where Black men just want to rape white women.
Right.
Like this was ingrained into the culture. This was the White House. And when you start to see, I say this, when I did my dissertation for my PhD, I asked a question. I said, when did America make any effort to say that what we were teaching white people were wrong? When did we say as a country that, hey, we socially conditioned white children to fear Blackness? And our policy today is a ramification of that fear. We don't have that discussion. And it's disingenuous to say that we're in a colorblind society if we don't discuss the reason that half of the budget for my city funds the police and we don't have an operational playground.
Yeah, exactly. Don't fund the schools.
Because and this is how deep this goes. Before Black communities had public sanitation, trash pickup, before we had running water, before we had parks, playgrounds, before we had any indoor plumbing, anything like that, we had policing. Before we had public education, we had policing. And when you start to look at this, and I tell people all the time, when you start to look at how fundamental this fear is, I don't care what you say, show me the policy.
Yeah.
Because if the safest areas in America have the least amount of police, then by default, what you're telling me is, by default, without even saying anything, what you're saying is you're dangerous people.
Mm.
You're saying that by your policy.
By the policy. Yeah.
By the policy says you're dangerous. That's what the 1993 where the federal government subsidized local police forces.
Mm-hmm.
You think, and I tell you, if you look at every Supreme Court case in the last 70 years where the police violated a person's right, do you know in every case is not one white person?
Oh, wow.
It's not one case where the police violated a white person and went to the Supreme Court from their rights.
Oh, wow.
Terry v. Ohio, Pennsylvania versus Mims. It was either black or Hispanic people. The police had violated their rights. And that's so important because the rise of police power in this country stipulates from fear of blackness.
Yeah.
And they don't, and they won't tell you implicit bias, implicit bias. They say, no, show me your policy. Because if I can use force on what I perceive, and I have to know how I'm being perceived before you go out the house, to your point.
Yeah, and and that's an important point because I was making that point with the whole John Morant situation, right? John Morant flashed his gun on Instagram, and automatically people were like, "Oh my God!" You know what I mean? Like folk act like John Morant killed somebody.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you have politicians who are showing their whole family with guns on sending out postcards and like these white families. But my whole point was that the only reason you jump to this automatic conclude John Morant just committed a mass murder, instead of what he did was a normal act inside of the context that America has a gun fetish. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What he did was completely normal, but people automatically connected that gun, his black skin, with criminality. That's what happened.
Well, and then you have to look at what buck breaking is.
Mm.
You don't know what buck breaking is.
Mm-hmm.
Buck breaking still happens today.
Mm.
And anytime you get out of place as a black person in America, they have to put you back in your place.
Mm-hmm.
When you Kyrie Irving, you send out a video and you say, I'm the Israelite.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nope, gotta put you back in your place. And I think that that's so important because the economic situation in this country has been so powerful to keep us in our place because I don't want to mess up my bag to support some consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta feed my family. I gotta take care of myself. And I think that it's going to be so empowering when the powerful people realize. Remember on the Titanic when that guy tried to give them all that money to save himself?
Mm-hmm.
When the ship was sinking.
Mm-hmm.
I can't spend your money to buy me the Atlantic, bro. And when black folks come to the realization that their money ain't gonna save us, boy, it's gonna be powerful because people are gonna speak truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we're at. We need people who speak truth to power and intelligent. And I think the only reason that I have an issue with athletes and celebrities is like I feel like you have to be educated first.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not educated, then they're going to make a mockery of you because you will not address the systemic issue. You will talk about the dressing, but you won't talk about the salad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we're at today. We're like, hey guys, call yourself colorblind if you want to, but I know I have to move differently in this world.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I have to raise my children in a different reality. You have to raise your children in, and you don't have the fear that they're going to be, get pulled over one day and they ain't coming home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point I will make about free children. I say, listen, we loved our children to the point that we had to give them a choice. And I think this is why I tell people all the time. I said, when you raise children to be rebellious, you have to start young. You have to start young for rebellion. And I think that this generation of black people coming up are not afraid to rebel.
Right.
Not afraid to rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because of that, black and white,
mm-hmm.
they're not afraid to rebel. And I think that is part of what raising free children look like.
Right.
Free children can rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, you have to pray for them. You have to hope for them, educate them, but know that they are going to rebel.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, Doc, but I also think in that that's why we're seeing all these changes, these attacks on CRT and these attacks on banning books and stuff like that, because this generation is rebelling, and guess what they're going to raise? They're going to raise another generation that's going to rebel. So you don't want that generation to learn about what.
But that's the beauty. The more they try to censor and ban, it's like if I tell you don't think about an elephant, what you gonna do?
Think about an elephant.
And so if I say don't learn QRT, they're gonna be on Google and they're gonna be reading.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the beauty of our system, is that you can, I said that the truth goes through 4 stages. First is ignored, then is ridiculed, which is, and then it's violently opposed, and then it's self-evident. And if you look at CRT, it's transitioning between stage 2 and 3. Because you can't ridicule the scholarship, because I can't disprove your theory without proposing another hypothesis. So you have to explain to me the phenomenon that I'm explaining to you. And if you reject mine, for example, I'm not a physicist. So when I see E equals MC squared, I can't go to Einstein and say, Einstein, you wrong. Because I don't know physics.
Right.
I don't know what that means. And if I'm not going to propose an alternative theory, I have to be quiet while those who can do.
Right.
And we are seeing people who are not educated on issues speaking in spaces where those who are educated are getting drowned out.
Oh, yeah, man. See that a lot, man. All these opinion spaces and these debate spaces. I saw Karen Hunter talk about that, and she was completely right. The need for people to debate rather than have conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like, to do what we're doing. You know what I'm saying? Hey, bro, you have anything?
Yeah, no. I was gonna jump into a story time. Because Dr. Ham was telling the story about the fear that's taught to us, right?
Yeah.
Story time. I started getting taller in middle school, and there was a assistant principal, Mr. Smith. And that was his real last name. And I'm walking down the hallway, and he kind of just grabbed me up, and I was just like, "Yo, what's your problem?" And he was just like, "That's it. To my office, young." He already had a problem with me because I was a little rowdy, at times. But that stemmed from this day where he just grabbed me for no apparent reason. So I kind of just moved his hand, and he took me to the office. And now I'm upset because I'm like, I really didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So there was a teacher named Miss Farr, and she then came to me and she said, "Look, I'm going to tell you something." Older white lady. And she said, "You're probably not going to like what I have to tell you, but it's the truth." She said, "You're a tall, young black male." She said, "And with that, you were about the same height as grown white men and women in middle school." She said, "Just the sound of your voice," and keep in mind, I'm very soft spoken, and everybody tell me, "Man, speak up," but they don't understand my history was this white lady was telling me to talk softly.
Yeah.
At an early age.
Yeah.
Because I can set off fear into other people that I don't intend to even implement fear. Where now, we had a conversation with some folks who try to explain black masculinity and don't understand that I was taught fear.
Right.
At an early age.
Because you were seen as over masculine. You were seen as an adult rather than just a tall child.
Rather than a tall child, but not realizing that doesn't mean that you question my masculinity. What you should be questioning is the fear that was taught to me by the culture.
Yeah.
Right.
In this country.
Yeah.
And it's a adultification is the term when Black children are perceived as being older, more mature for their age.
That
Because
happens today.
Because this goes back to the plantation. You know, girls were giving birth at 10, 11 years old.
The moment they had a period, they would wait.
They would give birth.
Yeah, they would have a period, and then they would wait a few weeks, and then they were
their game.
Yeah, they were getting birth.
And one of the things in how this is pervasive is the things that our parents did to protect us from adultification. It's when the slave master said, "Look at little Johnny, he getting big." As a parent, you would say, "He ain't nothing. He a little runt. He good for nothing." Now, the parent was saying this because they love you and they want you to be sold. They were trying to downplay your growth. So what did this do psychologically to this child? It stunted their growth. Because if they showed any signs of independence, any signs of growth, it could be a tool that they could be sold off. So they wanted them to be childlike. They wanted them to be innocent as long as possible. But that's a luxury. That's why when Tamir Rice was killed, they was like he was a grown man.
He was a grown man.
Come on, bro.
Exactly.
And see, and this is the worst place to live is in the fear of someone that has power and ignorance together. Because you see this happening. I look at when police are called on people for just doing innocent things, you know, walking down the street that were afraid. And I'm like, the question becomes is if you don't address this, and I think and this is my own take on this. I think a part of it is mental illness.
It is.
I think a part of it is mental illness, irrational fear. Like if I'm afraid of a spider, then I could do something about that. I can go in the house. I can kill the spider. If I'm afraid of blackness, what do I do?
Yeah.
And therein lies the challenge of why we are overly disciplined, why we get harsher treatment, why Black children are suspended from school for things that white kids get a timeout for, why we are expelled at rates that are higher, why we, there was a study, they asked teachers about the children. They was asking them about the discipline in them. And they said to them that when the teacher can view you as her child, they will be more lenient with you. Same thing with the judge. When the judge is on that bench and can see his child in you, he's going to be more lenient. But when that judge or that teacher sees a stranger, sees a foreigner, sees an anomaly, they're going to be disassociated compassion from you. You won't get compassion. That's what happened with George Floyd. And when I start to look at empathy, the reason we don't get empathy, the reason that they'll say, well, look how big his nostrils is, how he can't breathe. Look how big. And I'm like, that is what the size of my nostrils got to do with air getting into my lungs. if you got your head on my come on, man.
Yeah.
It's illogical. And when you start to talk about policy, creating policy in the midst of all of this, and how do my interests converge? How do I have freedom of movement in a society that fears me without educating or without providing sanctions on the people for being irrational, not knowing that the systems were built for them? And therein is, I think, the crux of our challenge when it comes to public policy, when it comes to voting. It's that I believe that when it came to the Second Amendment, the first Black codes in America were not allowing Black people to own guns. Right. That was one of the first Black codes. You can't own guns. And I think that when you start to look, the Mulford Act with Ronald Reagan, the NRA supporting, no open carry.
Yeah, buddy.
Now, do you think about this and you say, wait a minute, the only substantial gun reform legislation came from when Black people in this country became militant. Legislation came because there it goes. There's interest divergence. No militancy here. No militancy here. You have to now follow a system of you can't protect yourself from the people who want to hurt you. And that to me is the fundamental idea of freedom, is I have the right to protect myself. And I think that for us, there is no protection from irrationality. because it will make people treat you in a way that is suspicious. It'll treat you in a way that is no empathy, and more importantly, they will justify your subhuman treatment for their own cognitive easement. And that to me is the most, I think, dangerous thing in this country. It's dangerous because it shows me something that you would not want this done to you.
Right.
You wouldn't, and for all of our history here, with very few exceptions, there has been no large-scale black violence on white people.
Yeah.
I mean, you got, Liberty City in Miami in the 80s. That was like, a one-off. You have the Nat Turner thing. But for the most part, we want to be left alone.
Yeah.
We don't want no problem. And I think that that's the dangerous, is that when you tell people that when you tell people, when you're not honest and can't say that I'm afraid of blackness. Black people, I was trained, like when I was young, to be conditioned that black people are dangerous, that black people are violent, and I've been socially conditioned to believe that they are hood and they all drug dealers and blah blah blah. And there's no effort in the school system. There's no effort in the parental system. There's no effort at all to counteract these narratives. But then you send us out into the world asking us, wait a minute, who is the one who should be afraid? Like seriously, if you look at the history of this country, the lynchings and the racial violence and the terrorism and the bomb, and if you look at all of the things that have been done to us in this country, and you say, who do you think will be afraid?
Yeah.
I mean, by default. And I think that when it comes to our understanding that it takes radical change, because when it comes to these tinkering around the corners, all you're seeing is data being used to support an agenda, and the races don't have any new arguments. And I think that is the crazy part. They're regurgitating the same arguments from 100 years ago.
100 years ago, yeah.
And I'm like, bruh, get some new material. You know what I'm saying? Get some material.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to like touch on, you know what I'm saying, when we're talking about this post-racial myth in America, you know what I'm saying, that, there's people out there who are like, especially with the affirmative action thing, like, well, they're kind of throwing their hands up. We'll see. There's already a history that shows you what happens in America to when the guardrails of, to protect people from racist, from the racist being racist, right? When after Reconstruction, right? Once the racists are not policed anymore in the South, what did we see immediately happen? You know what I'm saying? Once they got pulled out, you know what I'm saying?
Terrorism.
It was terrorism. Exactly. Terrorism. We lost. Black people are losing land, losing economics, losing a lot. Right. The moment that the Voting Rights Act, the pre-clearance from the Voting Rights Act got pulled, what did you immediately see in 2016? You saw black, participation go down. A lot of that
from purging.
Right.
Purging
right, because it allowed for the racists to be racist, right? And here's the thing that people don't realize: what happened after the Voting Rights Act. You had places like the Heritage Foundation, another right wing places that studied how black people voted, right? Yep. So then you get places like Georgia was like, oh, they do souls to the poll, huh? Well, guess what? You're not going to do anymore. You know what I mean? Oh, y'all hand out water to people? Oh, well, guess what? You're not going to do anymore. So y'all do ballot harvesting. Y'all pick up ballots from old people in these rural towns, and then y'all take them. Well, guess what? You're not going to do anymore. You young people, y'all want to participate too? Oh, guess what? You're not going to do anymore. They started studying.
You out of state people living in that college dorm. Ohio guy said, hey, if you go to Ohio State, you can't vote here. But I'm a resident. And I'm like, but this is the same court that just said that Alabama is drawing racist maps to stop us from voting. So I'm like, bro, hold on.
Alabama and somewhere else. They said 2 states.
I think it's North Carolina. North Carolina. Yeah. And they're saying you guys are drawing racist maps to silence the black voters in black majority districts, but we're colorblind. I'm like, bro, be consistent.
But in that argument, they recognize that it was that the maps were drawn based on racial lines. Like you can, and then you come back and an affirmative action is colorblind. The Constitution is now all of a sudden colorblind.
Yeah.
What are we doing here? You know what I'm saying? You know, when we talking about that stuff, man. You know, one of those things I wanted to like kind of go back on because I wrote this down when you were talking, Dr. Ham, about you know, plantation, you know, mentality. And I remember reading Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery, and there's a point in Booker T. Washington's book where he's like proud of this moment for some reason. He's like, yeah, you know, when black people, when the black people became free, they went back because they felt sorry for their former masters who were now living in abject poverty. People were giving them food and giving them, and then people were returning back to the plantations. Well, that led to Jim Crow. That led to God dang, what was it where they were working on the farm?
Sharecropping.
Yeah, that led to sharecropping. They should have left them folk.
You know the story about Robert Smalls?
Deuces. Yeah.
Robert Smalls bought the plantation where he lived at, and they let the old mistress live there out of the rest of her life. And like, bro, we some nice people in the world. I swear. I swear we the nicest folk. Because she'd have been hungry to mess with me. But I'll tell you this. I said that when I read that book, there was a point that he made at the end about the fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking like, man, that would have been a great idea if he was just talking about black folks.
Yeah.
If he was saying that, like, look, black folks, y'all should be separate like this hand.
Separate, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when y'all need to come together, we're pissed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, but he was saying that for that. And I'm like,
he was saying that for everybody.
And I think that therein is the challenge that we run into is, and this goes back to that, the enslaved person that got religion was more effective than any other ones. You actually got more money if the enslaved person had Jesus. It was actually a sign that they were going to be docile. They weren't going to hit you back. They're going to turn the other cheek. If you whooped them, they was going to think they got whooped because they were disobedient, not because you were evil or cruel. They were disobedient. Well, if I wouldn't have dropped that picture from Master, I wouldn't have got beat tonight. It's my fault. I'm clumsy. I deserve that beating. He's like, yeah, bro, of course you think that he's a good dude. He's just trying to give you that correction because the Lord corrects those who he loves, and I'm giving you the correction from the God. And so we internalize this poison.
Yeah.
Poison in our thinking that I don't, and I tell you, if I had to pick the number one issue, I say, look, we did not learn how to call someone an enemy. We didn't know what that meant because we were told to what? Love them. Love your enemy. If they do word to you, despitefully use you, they trick, love them. And see, we didn't teach self-care first. We didn't teach love yourself first.
Right.
I love myself too much to let you abuse me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because my self-esteem won't allow you to talk to me like I'm an animal.
Right.
Because we are at an impasse right now. We can't go no further. And in that disrespect, we were conditioned to take the disrespect as a sign of our obedience to God. That's dangerous. Because then we thought the more we were being abused, the closer we were to God. So it was a sick system. And they loved it because they would abuse us more just to see how devout we could be. And I'm like,
and then sit back and make up stories and say, well, I mean, the black people I hung around, I mean, they were happy. I mean, there was nothing wrong.
Of course they were happy. Of course they were happy because, you know, one of the things when you read Frederick Douglass's narrative about the slave life, man, Frederick Douglass is cold, man. He just let it. He didn't take the approach that Booker took.
Yeah.
He talked about how they used starvation and hunger to get you to be obedient. How they pretty much fed you. Like, man, the prison in Louisiana is called Angola. It's called Angola, and it was on a slave plantation. It's called Angola because the enslaved people who came from Angola went to that plantation.
Yep.
They still call it Angola today. And this is what the warden at Angola said. He said, well, the best way to prevent escapes is to work them from sun up to sundown so they're too tired to run away. And I'm like, bro, this is what he said. Literally work them like slaves so they can't. I'm like, wow. And the audacity to say that, to think that it's okay to say work them from sun up to sundown so they can't run away. And this thinking is so ingrained. And when it comes to the religious idea, I would say this. Toussaint Overture, devout Christian, Catholic. He led the Haitian Revolution. And he just believed that the God that he served wouldn't allow you to treat me this way.
Yeah.
And we never got that revelation. That the God you serve allows you to treat me this way, to segregate me, to keep me from resources, to keep me in the poverty, to keep me in a slum. And I have to disagree with your idea that this is divine. And the plantation mentality is so powerful because, and this is to the colorblind society, what it says. It says that the reason that you have not made progress here is not because we haven't been good to you. It's because you are somehow defective. It started off you were defective individuals. And then they realized we can't really say that anymore. It's kind of racist. So then we'll just say something's wrong with your culture. Wait.
Right.
You just raised criminals. He's like,
your dad wasn't there. Fatherlessness. Your mom raised you to be feminine and all this other stuff.
And you're like,
so,
excuse me?
Yeah. So if you think about the affirmative action case in the Chinese student that was in that case, that was his exact words. You know, in the African American community, they tend to have low scores. You know, so what he's saying is they're uneducated.
Right. Yeah. That is what he's saying.
And that narrative is still going on.
Yeah, and even the reason that the person who invented the SAT test was a racist.
Yes, it was a racist reason why they did it.
He invented the test to prove that we were not mentally applicable. And I think that, but even going back, I would say, man, David Walker wrote an appeal. It was the first. This book was so powerful that they outlawed reading because of it. The book was so dangerous to the institution that if you were found with a copy of the book, they either cut your tongue out or kill you. That's how dangerous this book was. Because David Walker makes an appeal to the diaspora, not of America. And his argument is the behavior. He's saying that he was a freed person and he would watch the behavior of enslaved people and say, you guys don't get it. Like, you guys just don't get it. And I think he has a chapter in there about religion. He has a chapter about the ideas that, okay, so a black person would say, my child could read just as good as any white child. And you would think, okay, but the white kids are illiterate.
They're illiterate, yeah.
They can't read.
Right.
And so what you're saying is you are measuring your status by people who don't even have attained even the abilities. And that to me has become such a challenge, to measure yourself by people who are only have worth by putting you down. And I think it was Tony Moore said, if you only feel tall with me on my knees, something wrong with you.
Yeah.
We've never internalized that meaning. We've never said the standard is not excellence, because I think that what they created is this false dichotomy of black excellence. It's a problem.
Listen, that's a podcast in and of itself.
Well, but the reason the problem is because when you start to talk to people about this, what it creates is this system that the most intelligent people in this world come from Africa, IQ wise, on par, on mass. I think there's some kids in Africa, like 12-year-old, got IQ higher than Einstein, all these dudes, right? And then you start to say, well, we can't talk. We have a problem. We created a problem. We told you guys were inferior. We told you guys were, not mentally adaptable. So now we have to explain how you invented open heart surgery. Now we have to explain how you invented the cotton gin. It wasn't Eli Whitney.
Right, it wasn't.
People who get free labor don't invent stuff. like seriously, if I got free labor, why am I trying to invent something? And I think that's my challenge, is they have to reconcile our excellence and combat it with this idea that we were subhuman. And that's creating cognitive problems, because it has to be one or the other.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up, man, on that, man. So, last words. Oh, hold on, man. I'm doing this whole podcasting thing wrong. First, thanks, Dr. Ham. Yes. Appreciate you, man. It was great, having you on today, man. Dropped a lot of jewels, a lot of bomb fire, man. Fire, and hopefully we see you some more on this platform, man. And as always, thanks for the folks who tuned in. So we're just gonna wrap up, and and last words, man. So you want to start, JY?
Man, I want to say thank you as well. Good to have you on the podcast, man. My final words is, we're coming to election year, right? And we are watching Black unemployment rise as we are going into the election year, due to the effects of what's happening in the Supreme Court and so forth. I really need Black people to start paying attention to the chess pieces on the board, and we make this argument just about every podcast, man. But we really need y'all to pay attention, man. This is a chess game. It's a marathon, and look, we got to play this game. Yeah. It's a game of life, and we just got to figure out how to move within the chessboard.
Yeah, man. Good word, bro. Dr. Ham.
No, man, I really appreciate you guys, man. I think that so often when we start to share our ideas, it's how we get validity. We sometimes, can have great ideas, but they don't get out into the atmosphere, and we have to put them out there, share them. If you can accurately write a problem down, it's halfway solved. And I think when it comes to us, we are doing that.
Yeah,
we are writing the problem down, and I think that we are looking at the opportunities in there. And I think that when it comes to our community, I tell people that you can't believe and both know something. Mm-hmm. If I know it, I don't need to believe it. Mm-hmm. If I believe it, I don't know it yet, but it's okay. Belief is powerful when it's used correctly, because I have to believe it sometimes before I know it. Mm-hmm. And I think I encourage that. I encourage that, the idea that getting the knowledge, but don't let it be the end all be all. And I think that the belief in us is that we didn't come this far to be left stranded. I believe that. I believe that there are good days, but I also believe that it's going to require us to have knowledge. And when those things intersect, man, great things will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Good word, Doc. Yeah, for me, last word is that, man, I'm supposed to start the podcast off with this, but I'd be forgetting. But I just be forgetting. Yeah, man, next year is a very important election, man. And Black people, we need to show up at 70% to the poll. We have to vote at 70% as a power base for the next 20 years. And I'll just be honest, man. Yeah. And so, I would say that people need to understand that we are not a post-racial society. because there are things that intersectionality, right? Kimberly Crenshaw. I need people to read Kimberly Crenshaw to understand what intersectionality is, right? So at some point, your gender is going to intersect with race. You're going to intersect with government. You're going to intersect with something as you move about in America. You know what I'm saying? And really globally, if you're out there traveling. So understand the systems and the mechanism. Understand systems has outcomes, and those outcomes are positive and negative. There is no equal system in this country or in this world that's not created. You know what I'm saying? And with that, man, always, man, share, and hopefully people build, their own platforms and build community, man. But we appreciate y'all. Appreciate you again, Dr. Ham. Appreciate you, bro. JY for,
Yes.
yeah, man. So appreciate all the folks out there that tuned in, man. And yeah, man, we'll see ya on the other side. Yeah.